Well, good morning and welcome to the Employability Skill Series, where we explore the top skills employers are looking for in candidates. Each week, we will cover a different topic with a variety of professionals in different industries to share their thoughts and insights. I am your host, Megan Morrow, Associate Director of Career Services, and today I have Steve Horswood, President and CEO of Marin Consulting, as my guest. And we will be discussing the importance of pointing out mistakes without demoralizing in the workplace. Steve is a project management professional with 40 years of experience developing, deploying, and evaluating enterprise resource planning, or the ERP systems, aimed at improving business operations. He spent the majority of his career working with international organizations across 6 continents, helping them identify inefficiencies in their business systems and providing recommendations for process and system improvements. Steve is currently the president and CEO of Marin Consulting, a boutique firm that specializes in software selection and implementation. Good morning, Steve. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey, good morning, Megan. Thanks for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to your students about some of the experiences I've had with managing the manager-employee relations. Those are always sometimes very dynamic and sometimes pretty challenging. And I specifically want to talk about the toxic work environment. Those things really create a lot of drama that frankly are unnecessary. But I want to just kind of talk about some of the things I've experienced, how to identify them, how to combat them, and how to deal rationally with them. So, a toxic work environment is kind of the genesis of that is that person who's in authority and is just a bully. They harass and otherwise make people's lives really miserable. So a lot of the turnover related in the work environment today is in large part directly related to a toxic workplace. So you probably heard the term quiet quitting lately. A lot of that is because people are just shutting down. They're the environment, whether it's your manager or whether it's a coworker, they create an environment that just is unhealthy. So I just want to kind of talk about some of the factors, both from an employee perspective and the manager perspective, because over the course of your career, your students are going to be on either side of that equation. So you need to understand as an employee, what are some of the symptoms of this? How do I react to it? How do I deal with it? Is there anything I can do to minimize the impact it has on me personally and my mental health and just overall work satisfaction? So to that end, I kind of want to just start with saying that, mistakes happen. You can't avoid them. It's all part of just, living in day-to-day environment. And frankly, if you're not making mistakes, you're probably not doing a whole lot. So again, I want to let's kind of move into some specific examples, and I'm going to start with the employee side. So when, as an employee, you need to understand that when you make a mistake, it's not something that is likely going to go unnoticed. You cannot just hope that nobody's going to notice that these things happened. So your first and foremost responsibility is to be proactive. So get out there, don't wait for somebody else to expose the problem. Acknowledge the mistake, and be careful about getting defensive about the mistakes you've made. You want to own it. And so the best way to do that and avoid being defensive is to just stick with the facts. Here's what happened. Here's what we're going to do about it. So again, the first step then is, after you acknowledge and again, being proactive, you're going to go to the manager. Hey, here's what happened. Let's work on a solution. So you got to really, before you can do anything, you have to determine what caused that mistake. And all of this gets to, how you can be upfront and avoid, you can't avoid criticism, but you can at least be in a position of a positive communication with your manager. So determine what caused the problem, devise a solution. So again, you don't want to just dump a problem on a manager's desk. You want to go with the problem, but with a solution. So, that goes with, if you're just going in to complain, you don't go in and complain without saying, here's what I want to do to fix it. You do the same thing when you've created a problem. You've either made a mistake or some series of events created a negative business environment. So figure out what caused it, how to fix it, and then finally, what do you do to make sure these things don't happen in the future? So, again, mistakes happen. Almost all of them are fixable. They're seldom catastrophic, but it's how we react as an employee, on how our manager then is going to react to us. So if you own the problem, you're upfront about it, you don't try to blame somebody else, then it's really tough for somebody to berate you when you've taken ownership, you've stepped up and said, I caused it, here's the facts, here's what we might be able to do to fix it. So that's the first steps in kind of diffusing the situation, along with resolving the issue, get your business back where it needs to be.
I like that.
So having said,
I
I'm
think
sorry,
you
go
touched
ahead.
on that because that's something that we talk about in class too, is like, if you make a mistake, just kind of own it and then just kind of move on, not trying to blame others or not trying to be like, well, what happened was, just like, no. And then I think that also gives the opportunity to earn more respect from the employer. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. And so that gets to, from the manager's perspective, how the manager reacts to that and how, what level of respect they have for you is either increased or decreased by your ability to, again, take ownership and help solve the problem, be part of the solution. So as a manager, then it's absolutely critical that when you are correcting an employee, you're doing that in private. And that gets to the whole theme of this conversation is how do you correct someone and not demoralize them? So, it's a cardinal sin of management to, go in guns blazing, yelling at the employee in front of their colleagues. Nothing, again, demoralizes somebody, whether it's in a social setting or whether it's in a work environment. You want to be able to have the opportunity to have a rational conversation, with your manager. They need to be somebody that is looking for facts and the solution, not for somebody to yell at and to blame. So, having a discreet conversation really does engender that loyalty you were just talking about, Megan. If you're a bully, you're going to be, your employees are going to react to you as a bully. If you are a mentor, they're going to react to you as a mentor. That loyalty goes up exponentially, and you're going to get more productivity, more just positive work environment around people that respect you as a manager, not fear you.
Yeah, I've been in situations where I've had managers like that, where it's just that they're managers and they're not leaders and they're not worthy of followership. So it's like we're only productive and doing what we're supposed to be doing when they're right there over us because we don't have any respect for you. So we're not going to give our best. When you have a leader, somebody that is worthy of your followership, I find it like, like you said, like the productivity is higher, the morale is higher, and we don't have to be like scolded or micromanaged because we're giving it our all because we respect the institution and we respect the leadership. So attitude absolutely does reflect leadership.
Yeah, you couldn't be more right there, Megan. And as that manager where you're bringing the person in to privately have that conversation, it says that your goal is really to resolve the problem and make sure it doesn't happen again, not to humiliate the employee. And unfortunately, that's how some managers operate. And I think it's a function of their lack of confidence as a leader and as a manager. And so they think that the best way to do it is to beat somebody into submission. So, so step one is you bring them into a private situation, address the issue. And you really want to strike a balanced approach on how you get to the facts. So it's, you go in guns blazing and telling the employee that that they've basically saying that they're not very effective.
Mm-hmm.
So what you want to be able to do is really understand the problem from their perspective. What happened? How did it happen? Why did it happen? And then, as opposed to just going right to the punishment phase and telling them, you do that again, you're going to get fired. That doesn't solve anybody's problem. So you need to understand what the problem was. You ask questions, don't assume. And then it's resisting, from a manager's perspective, you want to resist telling them how wrong they are and how much damage they've caused, but you really want to give them a chance to explain. There may well be mitigating circumstances that you weren't aware of, and as a result, it opens up a whole different avenue for a solution. And then finally, you want to involve them in the fix. So hopefully, as the employee, they've thought of how to mitigate this problem. But as the manager, you want to encourage that. Tell me, how can we fix this? And then how can we make sure it doesn't happen again? Those are key to getting, the right level of engagement from the employee. Because if you're yelling at them, telling them, all the mistakes that they've made, they're going to basically shut down because you've already demoralized them. And now they don't have anything invested to make the problem better, make that relationship between the manager and employer any better. And then finally, you reframe the mistake in a teachable moment as best you can. Asking them what they've learned from this thing. And quite honestly, what they've learned will likely surprise you. But again, it's giving them the opportunity to participate in, the problem from beginning to end, from identification to resolution. And it really can be a great teachable moment as a manager, but you have to be able to put the work in to give them the opportunity to come to that by themselves. If you try to force that on them, you're going to lose. You're going to lose that, that moment you have that you can really connect and help them grow as an employee.
I think that's,
So,
I think that's important. Also, too, the way that, how you were saying it too, like pointing out the fact that it's the mistake. It's not the person. The person isn't like a bad person or, like they made a bad choice. I mean, I think about that the way, even the way I parent my children. I never say you're a bad boy, you made a bad choice, that way I've separated the mistake from the person. And so it's not like you said, it's not catastrophic. It's not the end of the world, but depending on how we address it as people in authority over that person could be catastrophic for their morale.
Yeah, that's really the point is, this is just one small step along their overall career, but it's just like with children, if you constantly berate them, they begin to think that, that they deserve that kind of treatment, and also that they're not the good person that they really are. They're not effective. They're not somebody that can really contribute to the organization or to the family. You're setting that tone. as the manager, as the parent, you're setting that tone and you have total control over how that happens. So you have to be able to be self-reflective and kind of understand how you're coming across to your employees. And again, as your students, they're just joining the workforce. They're going to be on the other side of that, but they need to understand that, managers have to go through that thought process. So sometimes it's not because they are anything other than maybe inexperienced managers and they're trying to learn along the way. And as employees, you have an opportunity to teach that manager how to manage, and how you react to them, and how the positive interactions you have with them when they're not yelling, has got to, deliver benefits. And again, it's just like kids. If you were to ask my kids, where did we have the most positive interaction? It wasn't when we were raising voices. It was calm, rational discussions.
Mhm.
So again, to that end, as you're talking about managers, we're talking about all the positive things that managers can and should do. The reality is there's a lot of bullies out there, and they're not just on the playground. So you've got to understand, how to best work with them. You've got some power as an employee. You just have to understand how to wield that power. So some managers, as I said, they're bullies. They thrive on conflict. Part of it is because, they don't know how else to get across their message to their employees. And it may very well be a function of them having been treated that way. And they think, oh, that's how managers are supposed to act. So, as a manager, it's lead by example. And I think one of your previous seminars here was about leading by example. And that, builds, the future leaders, of the organizations. So, so if you haven't already experienced bullies in the workforce, sadly you will. And so just kind of know that, it's really important to understand that, as I said earlier, you're not powerless. So there's things that you can do, such as shifting the focus away from your boss to your job. So, you need to be able to do the best job that you can do. That doesn't mean you ignore your boss, but your focus should be on, what are my tasks and how do I get them accomplished?
Well,
Your boss is going to see that.
and let me jump in. Let me ask you this. And if you were going there, I don't mean to get ahead of myself, but what advice would you give for someone who maybe is encountering a bully, who's being berated, and that's their immediate supervisor, and especially bringing brand new into the workforce or young, and they're probably going to see that more than versus an older employee. Like, what kind of advice would you give for a young person like that?
Yeah, that's perfect segue, because that's kind of right where I'm going.
Perfect.
And so, it's really about understanding the bully, understanding, what's motivating him to react that way. And I think more importantly, is he a bully just to you, or is he a bully to all of his employees? Because that tells that sends a specific message to the whole workforce. So if it's just if I'm the manager and I'm picking on you specifically and leaving everybody else alone, that's one dynamic, because it says that it's not just a general, the guy's a jerk.
Mm-hmm.
It is, there's something about the relationship the two of you have that is creating that dynamic. So that's the first step, is to understand, is it just me? And at the risk of sounding paranoid, and everybody's out to get me, you've really got to be able to understand that. And by doing, in one of the ways you do that is kind of building that network of your colleagues and just checking in, are you guys experiencing the same thing? And again, is the manager doing it overtly and bullying you in the open in front of colleagues, or is it everything's fine until it's just a one-on-one and then he's a bully? So those are different types of bullies, frankly. So by building that network, one, you kind of reinforce that in many cases, oh, it's just not me. So it doesn't solve the problem, but at least it gives you some comfort to know that, it's not necessarily you're doing something specifically wrong, and it's more likely a product of the manager being a poor leader as opposed to you being, an ineffectual employee. And then separately is dealing with that manager, you have to set limits, both verbal and nonverbal, on, how you're going to interact with them. If they yell at you, do you yell back? If they criticize you, do you just take it and sulk, or do you stand up for yourself? So you've got to be strong. And again, when I say employees are not powerless, every year they get more and more, what's the word I'm looking for? They get more power in the way HR is becoming more involved in situations like this. So you have the opportunity, and it's not always the last resort, but it's not the first resort to go to HR and complain about your boss. So the first thing you do is you deal with them one-on-one and understand, and as simple as asking, what is it about, why are you doing the things you're doing? Why are you picking on me? And they could be totally surprised. Wow, I had no idea. Or, maybe I respond by saying, you keep screwing up and I'm tired of it. So it's understanding that's the first step is, why is he behaving that way? And they may or may not be honest with you, but at least that's your first step. You have to do that before you can go to any of the further steps. So, ultimately you want to be able to, as you recognize this as a pattern, you want to take notes. And if this if this behavior is pervasive across the organization, you're building your network and talking to those folks, and make sure they're taking notes as well. So that at the end of the day, you've got an opportunity to go, and there's safety in numbers, and going, with some of your colleagues to HR to say, here's the issue we're having. Here's specific facts. I mean, nothing's worse than saying, well, he's just a bully, he's a bad manager. You've got to be able to say specifically, on this date, he did these things, and here was and basically you also want to be able to paint the picture. This is the environment that they're creating. So productivity is down, morale is down, people are leaving, and HR has an opportunity to step in. There's always that fear of retaliation. That's why there's safety in numbers. But again, at some point, you've got to protect yourself and your mental health. And and it could very well be that this is such an unhealthy workplace that you just really need to go somewhere else and find another job. But you don't want to do that because you're running away from a problem. You end up doing that because there really are no other alternatives for you. It could be that the HR department says, yeah, we're not going to do anything about it. Or they say, we'll investigate and never really do anything. So, I would never advocate, just go find another job when you have a bully, but that could very well be the most, what's the word again? It's probably the healthiest thing that you can do.
I had to do that. Yeah. I had he was just a tyrant. And I've shared this story with my students, like how important it is to enjoy your job. Because I would get to a point where I'd wake up every morning going, I have a flat tire, or I have a migraine, or my baby's sick. I was kind of thinking of anything I could think of to not have to go in. And then I would literally cry on the way in and cry on the way home just because he was so awful. And I survived a year there, and I was like, I can't do it. Like you said, my mental health was down the tubes, and I was just miserable. Couldn't even enjoy my weekends because I knew I had to go back. And that was awful.
Right. And so how and this may be for another day, but to talk specifically, and maybe you share that with your students, here's what I did, or here's what I didn't do.
Mhm.
And as a result, this is what happened. So you really got to be able to take responsibility for your own welfare in the workplace. You can't necessarily change their behavior, but you can also let them know that it's unacceptable and you're not going to put up with it. You're going to do your job and you're going to do it to the best of your ability. And if they can't treat you with respect, then, one of you is in the wrong business, with the wrong company. And, with any luck, the management of the organization sees that and gets rid of the problem, and they don't just sweep it under the rug and well, he's just always been that way. He doesn't mean any harm. Well, yeah, he may not mean harm, but he's causing harm.
Yeah.
And you've got to be able to take care of yourself. That's first and foremost. You got to take care of yourself. You can't be a snowflake and every little thing is going to bother you, but you've also nobody deserves to be bullied in the workplace. And as I said at the very beginning of this conversation, this quiet quitting is becoming rampant, and it's because the workplace is unhealthy in many cases, and the quiet quitting is not an appropriate response, because that says I'm not going to say anything. I'm just going to quietly, just do enough to get by and not get fired. So, said it probably way too many times here. You've got to stand up for yourself and take responsibility for, your own mental health. I mean, that's the best term I can come up with. So
that's good advice, because I definitely didn't do that for myself, and I learned that I will never be in that situation ever again. But didn't need to go through a whole year of that. So that's a good lesson that I learned, that I try to help, like make sure that other people don't do that to themselves, because that's like that false loyalty that, give it your all while you're there. But and I know you've told me this before in any of our mentoring sessions, don't have that false loyalty. Give it your all while you're there. But if it's not the place for you, then you need to move on, but do it appropriately, but then move on, so you're not burning any bridges either.
Absolutely. And to, a bit of a tangent there is that misplaced loyalty is one of the hardest things to get over, when people feel like they can't leave a job because, they have this loyalty to the company, which is admirable. Everybody should be loyal to their company, but they don't do it at the expense of their mental health. You've got to do what's right for yourself, because quite honestly, an organization, if they have to do layoffs, they're not going to say, oh, well, Megan's got a mortgage, so we're not going to lay her off. They're going to do what's right for them to keep their business running. So, you owe your employer 100% loyalty while you're there, but it doesn't say, that you are restricted from moving on. And again, misplaced loyalty is kind of the best term I can think of. You want to make sure that, as long as you can grow and be productive and healthy and happy in that environment, then great, go for it. But if you can't, it's time to move on. You're going to make yourself miserable. You're going to make the people around you miserable. So what I like to do is kind of close this out with an example of something I see way too often. It's one of the most overused management techniques that is just absolutely terrible. And so I'll give you an example. So it's called the compliment sandwich. So I don't know if you've ever heard that term, but it's typically used by managers that are risk averse and conflict averse. And so they sugarcoat the message because they don't want to hurt somebody's feelings, or they just don't have confidence in their managing ability. So I'm going to give you an example and then just kind of talk about what that kind of the outcome of that is. So I've got this employee, Bob, and I bring him into my office and I say, Bob, you've been doing a great job on the Baker project. Your team really seems to respect you. Recently, though, your status reports have been late and lack specifics, and it's hard to tell if it's on track or not. But you're such a strong project manager, I know that your next status report will knock it out of the park. So, what does Bob take away from that meeting? Says he's doing a great job, his team respects him, and he's a strong PM.
Mhm.
So the criticism is lost entirely, because you buried it in all that sugar-coated stuff. When really what you wanted to say is, hey, dude, your status reports are not delivering, what we need. I have no idea if your project's in trouble. I don't know if things are going sideways. I need you to really step up and do what you're supposed to do and deliver a positive or an effective status report. Now, then you give them some examples on, where it lacks and what they can do to improve it, but wrapping it up in all that other fluffy stuff, they just walk away feeling pretty good, and the boss thinks, well, I just took care of that problem, when in fact, all they did was create a bigger problem.
That's good.
So
Yeah, because I've heard that too.
Yeah, don't fall into that trap. And I see it, I've seen it over the years. And at first it sounds like, well, you're really trying to be positive and proactive and and not knock them down. So you prop them up a little bit. But the problem is you prop them up so much that your basic message is lost.
That's good advice.
So that's kind of where I wanted to end it is, just make sure that there's a lot of ways to deal with problems and in the workforce. There's constructive ways to do it, and it always starts by doing it in private and focus on the facts and keep the emotions out of it.
Yeah, that's good advice too. Yeah, separating the person from the problem for sure.
Yep.
Well, thank you so much for giving us your time. I really appreciate your thoughts and insights. I've always respected you and the business world, and you've been my mentor for a very long time, and hope to keep you as that for even longer.
I look forward to
it. Students, please make sure you scan the QR code on the screen or click the link I put in the chat pod several times. If you don't see it, just scroll up. But if you want your attendance counted, please scan or click. And Steve, thank you so much for being here with us. We'll talk to you soon.
Okay. Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Bye.
Bye-bye.